Well, we've got Edmund Schiavoni on the line, and we're going to talk about his book, Pathway to Glory, the first-rate, page-turning novel, which unfolds when the protagonist, Paul Stevens, attempts to take over the giant corporation that he is chief financial executive of. And Edmund is on the line with us here. How are you doing today?
Okay, I am. Everything is fine. It's a rather warm day here in New York today. The temperature is 70.
How is it so warm this time of year?
Yes, it's kind of weird.
What's going on?
The climate change, I guess.
What is the book about? Kind of expanding on the premise I read out.
And the idea came from two expressions I read in the New York Times one day when they were writing an article on mental depression. And one was, sorrow is the seed of holiness. And that was formulated by a Roman Catholic cardinal who since is long dead. And the other was, in defeat, we are all Christian. And that was coined by Ernest Hemingway when he wrote A Farewell to Arms. And those two expressions struck a chord with me. And I said, that would make a great theme for a novel. So I sat down and began to think about it. And I came up with this idea for a novel of the protagonist, Paul Stevens, as you mentioned. This guy he's a disgruntled guy. He's been passed over for jobs in the finance world. And but over the years, he slowly began to get promotions. And as he rose up the corporate ladder in a big corporation, he became more and more unhappy with the management of the company. And he decided he was so unhappy with the management, especially the CEO of the company, he was going to institute a hostile takeover of the corporation. Wow. That's just what he did. And there's 34 chapters in the book, and you would think from the title, which is very misleading, that it's a book on the steps to get to heaven.
Yes.
The first 31 chapters of the 34 total chapters in the novel certainly wouldn't lead the protagonist to heaven. He did all kinds of sinful things, outrageous. And as a result of that, he ended up losing his job. He ended up losing his wife and family. He ended up not only that, but he ended up losing all his money. I didn't tell you this part of the story. He got a hot tip on a train one day when he was going to work that from two people who were seated behind him to buy a stock. And he wrote the symbol of the stock down on his paper, on his newspaper for that morning. And he looked into it, and he put most of his money against his wife's wishes into this one stock. And it turns out the stock went crazy on the upside, and he was making all kinds of money. And that gave him the fortitude and the courage to say, I'm going to try and take this company over. I'm just going to try. I can't work for this guy anymore, who was the CEO of the company. So he institutes this hostile takeover, as I said, and as I said, ends up losing. So he ends up losing everything, his job, as I mentioned, and all of this. And he ends up on Skid Row in America. That's called the Bowery. And he was living in a flop house, and he was just down and out and had no money, and he was drinking heavily. And one night he's in a seedy bar in Manhattan, in New York City, and the bartender, he passes out at the bar, and the bartender sees this and says to the bouncer, throw this guy the hell out of here. Throw him out. So he picks him up and he throws him into the street, and he collides with a priest. And the priest takes him into his rectory. And that's when, in the 32nd chapter, his recovery begins. And by the 34th chapter, he becomes a born-again Christian. But he goes through all kinds of sinful things before he gets there.
So why did you call it The Pathway to Glory? Is it partly because of that end bit where he eventually does get to a good path?
Right, that's true. But because the priest, at one point in one of the chapters between 32 and 34, he says to the priest, when they're having breakfast, I'd like to go to confession. So during confession, the priest is talking to him, and he's sermonizing to him. And one of the phrases he uses is, the pathway to glory is not easily followed. There's twists and turns, as we all know, living our lives, right? And the temptations in living our lives, etc. And he tells them that. And so I said, that would be a great title for the novel. And so there it is.
Yeah, nice hardback as well you got there.
It's a hardback, right?
What would you say was your favourite part of it to write?
Well, I got a big kick out of writing this part of the novel, where after he loses his job, of course, he goes out and starts looking for another job. And he gets an interview with a computer company. And the guy who's interviewing him he does ask him for his resume, but he doesn't have a resume, of course, with him because he lost his job at this point. And so the guy who's interviewing, who's a personnel manager, says to him, he says, don't worry about it. I'll send you out to my secretary. We have forms here, applications for a job. So he goes out in the waiting room there, where the secretary has her office, and he fills out this application. And one of the questions in the application is, why did you leave your last job? And he ponders over that because he's afraid no matter what he puts down there, he's going to be in big trouble with this interview he's about to have. So he finally says, I'm going to tell the truth. So he puts down there attempts to take over present management via a hostile takeover. So he puts that in there, and he gets ushered back into this personnel manager's office. And when the guy sees that, he does tell him to go sit outside again. And he calls up the company that he just left. And he finds out from his prior employer that he indeed did try to take over this company, which is certainly not a thing that would manifest loyalty to his past employer. So he calls him back into the office, and he's seated there with him, and he tells him this. He's had a conversation with his prior employer, and that, we couldn't possibly hire you under these circumstances. Goes through the reasons. And then he makes the comment, he starts to say, the personnel manager to the protagonist, I think, and then the protagonist says to him, I don't care what you think. As far as I'm concerned, you can stick the job up your ass. And I got a big charge out of writing that in a novel.
Yeah. And do you think you'll write more books after this? Have you got any more coming up?
Well, no, I'm very musical, and I'm trying to get a musical on Broadway.
Oh.
Yeah, so I did all three, which is kind of unusual. I did the libretto, the lyrics, and the music. It's got 21 songs in it, and that's what I'm trying to do right now, is get that on Broadway.
Yeah.
So if I do, I'll be happy to send you a ticket for you and whomever.
Yeah, as long as the flights are included and the hotels. Before this show goes on Broadway, where are all the places that we're able to find your book, Pathway to Glory?
The easiest way to find it is on Amazon. Is there an Amazon in Scotland?
Yes, of course. There's Amazon everywhere, isn't there?
I would think so. It's a global. So it's on Amazon, and it has 5-star rating, which is the highest rating that you can get. So so it's on Amazon, it has a 5-star rating, and that's the easiest way to get a copy of it. You can get it either in hard copy or soft copy, or on the electronic version of it. So it's got something in it for everybody. I mean, including the mafia.
Ooh. Well, many thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, really. Thank you so much.